Hi, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting Group. We're an independent and technology agnostic digital transformation consulting firm. And today I wanted to chat about the Accenture digital transformation failure with Hertz. Hertz filed a $32 million lawsuit just a couple weeks ago against Accenture for the digital transformation failure that entailed trying to deploy web applications and an overall website for the Hertz reservation system. And Third Stage was not involved in this project, but just based on some of the public information that's out there that you may have read about, just wanted to share a few lessons and takeaways for what this means to digital transformation in general and how we can avoid some of these same challenges that Hertz experienced in this case. So the first thing here is that when we look at what happened in this failure, it appears as though Hertz chose Accenture without much due diligence. They had only considered one other option. They had one day of demos from the Accenture team and quickly chose Accenture to handle the transformation. You know, this in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad decision, but when you look at on the surface and outside looking in, it seems as though there wasn't a whole lot of consideration for other options and looking at what other partners might have been able to more successfully guide them through the digital transformation. Now, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, it's easy to say that Accenture wasn't able to handle it in this case, and they didn't do a good job, and there was some problems with the transformation. But it's a good lesson that we need to look at all of our options and make sure that we have a good team of people and a good partner in place when we're going through any sort of digital transformation, whether it's one like Hertz went through or whether it's a ERP implementation, CRM implementation, or whatever the case may be. The second thing, once Accenture was chosen, the second thing that Hertz seemed to run into is that they outsourced the project completely to Accenture and almost had somewhat of a blind faith in Accenture just to handle this digital transformation for them. And we see companies want to fall into this trap a lot, and it's a big risk, especially for big companies, because these are big, complex, hairy projects. And it's awfully easy to think, I'm just going to outsource this project to my system integrator or to my consulting partner. And that's typically a recipe for disaster, especially if you're going to completely outsource everything to from the project to them, and especially if you're not going to have effective risk mitigation and project controls in place and oversight of that system integrator. I used to work for one of the big system integrators. It's where I started my career, and I know the inner workings of how good these big companies are at selling their services and building comfort that they can be a one-stop shop to handle everything that you possibly could need for a digital transformation. But what I found through experience, having worked at the big system integrators, but also having been an independent consultant in more recent years, helping clients manage and navigate those system integrators, is that the system integrators are highly ineffective typically at managing your money, your time, the effectiveness of the project. And if you think about it, there's an incentive for them to staff as many people as they can on the project and bill you as much as they possibly can with minimal accountability if you're not going to provide any sort of oversight. So it's a really important thing to watch for. I know some of the bigger consulting firms are very good at building relationships and trust that lead to these big contracts that end up having very little oversight or accountability. So beware of outsourcing an entire project, and also not just outsourcing without oversight, but also recognizing that the system integrator can't possibly be good at everything you need as part of your digital transformation, even though they're highly effective at convincing you that they can do everything you possibly could need under the sun for a digital transformation. Typically, they're not good at the things that are most important to your transformation, which are things related to process reengineering, organizational change, the overall readiness, and just making sure we've got a clear business blueprint for how we want the transformation to look. Those are things that the system integrators in general, is a broad generalization, which is always risky, but it is a broad generalization that the big system integrators typically aren't good at that, and neither are the big consulting firms. So it's something to really be aware of. Is we don't want to outsource projects completely to them. We don't want to not provide oversight and risk mitigation and risk management and oversight of them. And we also don't want to assume that the system integrator can do everything, because they typically have weaknesses just like all of us do. And we need to figure out how to augment what that system integrator is good at with the things that are going to ultimately determine whether or not your project is successful. And then the third lesson, or the third big thing that we took away from this project, was that it was a proposed 16-month engagement. Now, Hertz is a pretty big company, lot of geographic complexity and geographic being geographically dispersed and global. That doesn't sound like a very realistic schedule to begin with, and that's one of the big challenges that we have here, is that the overall timeline was unrealistic to begin with. We can, without knowing a whole lot about the scope and the project plan that was proposed to Hertz, that sounds awfully aggressive and awfully unrealistic. So it's also important to really look at not necessarily falling into the trap of hearing what you want to hear, which is, hey, we can do this entire transformation in 16 months for you. You want to take that with a grain of salt and have a realistic view of what's this really going to look like. If we did do it in 16 months, how disruptive would that be, or could that be to our organization? And that apparently is something that either Hertz didn't do, or they did do it and they just assessed the risk and determined that it wasn't as big of a deal. Now, this has been somewhat of a public relations nightmare for Hertz. If you look at the end result of what's happened, not only is the lawsuit against Accenture being highly publicized here, but you also have, one of our team members was telling us, one of our team members from Third Stage was telling me about someone that had recently rented from Hertz and actually got arrested because the record wasn't in the system or something to do with this transformation, didn't appropriately track that customer order, and they reported the car as stolen, and that person ended up in jail for a couple weeks. Apparently there's an article out there about that. So you look at just kind of what negative impact this has had from a PR perspective and from an overall perception perspective, both for Hertz and for Accenture. And then you dig even deeper and look at, well, what kind of benefits are they really realizing? And I would suspect they're not realizing the ROI that they had expected from this digital transformation. So those are things to be aware of as we go through these sorts of transformations. So I always like to leave these with takeaways. What does this mean to you? How can we avoid this type of a train wreck or disaster for our own digital transformation? And there's really three things that we can take away from the lessons we've shared so far. One is to make sure you do your due diligence when selecting a system integrator. You want to make sure that you have chosen the best one, and also not assume that it's going to be one system integrator. You might want to, and I highly recommend augmenting from and diversifying away from one system integrator, so you're not hiring one company to do everything, because like I said before, no one consulting firm can be good at everything. But secondly, it hedges your risk. So it also creates a certain amount of accountability by having multiple parties in there. Now, if you ask a big system integrator, they would completely disagree with me and say that is absolutely a terrible idea because you want one single throat to choke. You don't want to confuse roles and responsibilities. That's a smokescreen to try and put all your eggs in one basket. And that's not, I haven't seen that be very successful much throughout my career. The companies that I've seen be most successful in their digital transformations are the ones that do hedge their risk, and they also diversify and hire different companies to do what they're good at. And the other thing is ensuring that you take control of the project. Even if you were to pick one system integrator, you need to manage them. You need to provide oversight, ensure you have complete transparency into why they're staffing the project the way they are, why they've got all the junior resources on the project. Do we really need as many people on the project as we have? And really challenging those system integrators, because what ends up happening with these big projects is the companies oftentimes will just hand the keys over to the system integrator, and the system integrator just basically has an open checkbook to do what they want. And again, this is a gross overgeneralization, but it is something that happens far too often in the industry, and I suspect that's something that probably happened here with Hertz. So make sure that you choose the right partners, that you provide the right amount of accountability, and you manage the system integrator and provide the right risk management and mitigation mechanisms and project governance, presumably from someone outside the system integrator, because you don't want the fox guarding the hen house, so to speak. So those are some of the lessons and takeaways. I've included a link to a blog that my colleague Brian Potts actually wrote about this case, and you can find that article on our website. If you click on the information tab below for this video on my YouTube channel, there's a link to Brian's blog that talks a little bit more about what we've talked about here today. So I hope you find this helpful. Hope you're having a great day. And again, my name is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, independent digital transformation firm. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll talk soon. Bye.